Hello, welcome to this episode of Talking About Rock. Here we bring you rock interviews from veteran and upcoming artists. I'm your host, Rob Edwards. We're always available wherever you get your podcasts on all the streaming services. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. Follow us on our social media and our website, talkingaboutrock.com. In the 1980s, MTV launched and recreated the music experience for many with music video releases. They also launched a live performance series showcasing musical artists, usually playing acoustic instruments, called MTV Unplugged. The first episode was taped on October 31st in 89 and aired about a month later, November 26th. And it featured such artists as Aerosmith, Elton John, Sinead O'Connor, Poison, Joe Satriani, and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Nirvana's performance on Unplugged was one of the last televised performances by Kurt Cobain, recorded on November 18th, 1993, about 5 months before Cobain's death. And also in 93, Stone Temple Pilots filmed the 26-minute episode of Unplugged when they debuted the song Big Empty prior to its release for the album Purple. In 96, Alice in Chains gave their first performance in 3 years on one of their last concerts as a group for 9 years. We also all remember the Unplugged episode with Kiss, which led to their reunion. Today we have for you a band who is a tribute to those shows and artists. Unplugged, a tribute to MTV, is based out of Buffalo, New York, and is the first and only Unplugged tribute band in the United States, who play chart-topping hits and songs that have become hallmarks of artists performed stripped down and completely live for the audiences to enjoy. These iconic songs that helped carve out a new genre in music, Unplugged. Next up on Talk About Rock, we speak to Paul Wanecski from Unplugged on Talk About Rock. Okay, we now have with us Paul Wanecski from Unplugged. Hello, Paul. Welcome.
Hey, what's going on?
Too much, man. So we're here to talk about the era of Unplugged on MTV. We know it created some great music and some great moments. How did you guys start this project?
So this was actually something that was sort of a brainchild prior to the pandemic. And obviously when that happened, you kind of hit a pause on live music and things like that. So really had time to think about this. And one of the things that I've noticed about a lot of tribute bands is you see a lot of tributes that are out there to specific artists, right?
Right.
And even to genres, right? So you've got some really, really great bands at Buffalo that do genre specific stuff. Like you've got, Mayday Buffalo, you got the Nerds, you got guys that fit in that genre category.
Right.
But I never saw anybody that did one to a television show, right? And Unplugged was exactly that. It was a TV show. And that was one of the things that we wanted to, when we started this band, kind of treat it like it's a TV show. So we do a lot of really neat things that kind of separate the show and the production side a little bit from a lot of other shows that you might see. And we can get into that, but I'd never seen anybody that did anything to a television show. And this was just, it's too hard musically of a challenge to turn down.
Yeah, it's definitely a different thing. When MTV first came out and then they obviously exploded, it was a new thing back then, right? To see music videos for songs. We hadn't seen something like that. Maybe the record companies had stuff they shopped around to show for their shows and stuff like that. But we had never seen that when MTV came out. And then you had new songs coming out all the time. And then when they started this Unplugged thing, it just really took off. It was a groundbreaking moment for a lot of different artists. Things that come to mind for me is Nirvana was huge on there. Kiss, it created their reunion tour.
Sure did. Yeah.
Basically, you know what I mean? And it definitely highlighted tons of other artists. I mean, there were tons of folks on there, everyone from, Aerosmith, Elton John, Rat, Poison, to the list goes on and on.
Sure.
Different guys, in there. What was in the 90s? It was REM. I think The Cure was on there, and even Paul McCartney did a special on this. It was a huge thing, and like you said, it was kind of encompassing all different types of music. You know what I mean?
And it was a huge challenge, right? Because a lot of those artists were playing, arenas at the time or very large venues, and they were challenged to do it without electrical instruments. So like Aerosmith, they had to have a piano. They weren't allowed to have a synthesizer. Unplugged was really, really specific about that until they got to Nirvana. When they got to Nirvana, they kind of bent the rules a little bit. But prior to that, they told artists no. Like, well, we want to have, this instrument. It's like, does it plug in? Because that's not allowed. Right. They were really, really specific about it. And you're right. There's even artists who did Unplugged a couple times, like 10,000 Maniacs. They actually did Unplugged twice. The one that everybody knows where they covered, Springsteen's Because the Night, that's the one that everybody remembers. They had actually done the show a few years earlier, back when the show was in its very, very infantile stages. They actually had a host of Unplugged. And what they would do there is they would, the host would come out and play a couple songs with the band, and then they'd get their friends to come out. Joe Walsh showed up with like nobody, right? It was really crazy.
But it's
and how last minute it all was.
Yeah, and it was only supposed to be, I think, like 13 episodes. They kind of wanted to just test it out. Eventually they dropped the host and just proceeded as a acoustic music type program.
Yeah.
With whoever they had, because people really, really dug it. It was definitely a very cool thing to do. No one was doing anything like that. Again, at the time, MTV was kind of groundbreaking in that way to do that.
And unfortunately, we have Bon Jovi to thank for that, because the producers who came up with the concept for Unplugged saw Bon Jovi at an MTV Music Awards do a song acoustic. It blew the roof off the place with just Bon Jovi and, and a single guitar, and it blew the roof off the place. And they said, whoa, wait a minute, there's something here. And that's actually what spawned the television show. And again, so much of it was last minute. And Robert, we could go into the history of all that. So I'll give you an example, right? One thing that we do here with our band, Unplugged, a tribute to MTV, is we always pick different artists that we feature. And that's what makes the band so challenging, is every show is a different artist.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Like, what do you cover in the project? You mix it up a lot, huh?
Yeah, it's big time. So we've done Pearl Jam. So we did Pearl Jam's Unplugged. We did Alanis's Unplugged, but we're pulling back a little bit on that to just do Alanis's Jagged Little Pill album, because she had released that as an acoustic album. So we're going to do that at Town Ballroom on November 18th. Nirvana, obviously, we're doing that November 18th at the Town Ballroom. We did Alice in Chains at the Town Ballroom in February or March. It was somewhere around there.
So your performances are not all encompassing. It's like each performance is like celebrating an episode of whoever was on that.
Oh, yeah. We play commercials. We pull old MTV news clips to work into production during the show. So there's a lot. We really do try and treat it like a TV show where, it's that, because that's how we all consumed it, right? Like I watched those episodes, so I consumed it as a TV show. So when you go to a live performance, when you take that out of context, it's still great music, but to do those really nostalgic things along the way kind of take you back to when, you had to get up to change the station. Like we all were there, right? So it's just one of those neat things that makes the show so different. But like, I'll give Pearl Jam as an example. Go back to the history of Unplugged, right? So during our shows, you'll see camo mesh up in our shows. Now, that doesn't really mean anything to Unplugged. Camo mesh isn't all that important, except that Pearl Jam used camo mesh as their backdrop, right? And the other artists that recorded on that weekend, because they would often record multiple episodes in a weekend, those other artists also had camo mesh. It was just lit differently. So we have camo mesh. We have lava lamps because Alice in Chains had lava lamps. We do those little things to try and harken back to those Unplugs that are kind of like the cornerstones of what people think of when they think of Unplugged. So like for Nirvana, we'll have stargazer lilies all over the stage because that was critical. Kurt wanted it to look like a funeral. So they got him a bunch of stargazer lilies, and that was kind of last minute. And so much of what they did was last minute. So we obviously have it a bit more planned than they did, right? But we try and grab all those little things to add into the stage show.
That's excellent. Yeah. So creating the visuals is definitely a huge thing for a live performance.
Oh, yeah.
And that you're paying homage to that. That's really amazing. So tell us a little bit about some of the other members of the band here. You have Sarah on vocals.
Yep.
Give us a little history about her.
So Sarah Grenauer, Sean Grenauer, her husband, plays bass for us. We've been playing music together for years. My age started with a 2. That's how long it was. That was a long time ago now. I'm 41 now. We've been playing music together since I was in my early 20s. They are dear friends of mine. Very, 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 very talented musicians. So I've been fortunate enough to play with them in a couple bands. We played in a cover band called Southbound that did a bunch of country music. We were most recently in Prestige Worldwide that played a bunch of just cover music. It was a bar band. We had a lot of fun in that. Our guitar players, Tom Proctor from the CT Scan, and Mike McLaughlin, previously of Cheshire Cat. That might be a name that you remember as far as local bands go. So Mike is back. Mike took a long time off of music. I dragged him out of retirement to do this because his schedule just wasn't great. And he's one of those musicians that when you look at him and you know he's not playing, you're like, that's not right. Like the scene needs a player like Mike. So I dragged him out of retirement. Our drummer is Christopher Joel. He actually plays guitar with our guitar player, Tom, in CT Scan. And Christopher's a phenomenal solo and duo acoustic act, but he's actually a drummer. He plays guitar to do solo and duo acts, and he sings wonderfully. But we've pulled him to play drums because he's actually a drummer by trade.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
So
and for this show, we've got good musicians that are kind of from the corners of the music industry, which is fun, right? They're not names that everybody is going to really connect with, and that's okay, right? We did add for this show Leah Rankin, and Leah is a cello player, so we've got cello throughout the entire show. Again, it was critical to Nirvana to have a cello player, so Leah's picked up the whole show, so she's doing the Alanis stuff with us. And not only are we going to do Alanis and Nirvana, but we'll do probably 8 or 9 songs that are from like Unplugged's greatest hits. So Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and we'll actually do some songs that the artists didn't do because that's fun. We're there, like Nirvana, they didn't do songs like Heart Shaped Box. They hadn't written, You're Right. Those songs weren't done in Unplugged, but I think people would want to hear those. So we're going to sneak some secret songs into the set list, and people might not even realize that they were never done.
Yeah, that sounds great. So you guys got shows coming up, the Town Ballroom, Saturday, November 18th.
Yep.
Then you're back again Friday, March 24th. They're playing that. It's such a great venue. I really like that place. It's definitely very fitting, I think, for what you're doing. Just a very cool atmosphere and just a very great layout. It almost harkens to like an Unplugged type of thing because it's in the round and it's more intimate. I think that's great there. I think you guys have played there before, correct? Also,
yeah. So the March show that you just mentioned was actually our last date at Town Ballroom. Now, one thing, Robert, that we do with this band, we only play about 5 shows a year, and that's because we really take our time to make sure that we pick the right artists. Because it's a lot of music to learn, right? Like, when are you ever going to play? When are we ever going to play Polly again? Right? Like, it's a good song. It's critical to Nirvana, but nobody comes to a show like, oh, I hope they play Polly. It's a good song, but in context, right? We really take our time. So we probably only play 4 or 5 shows a year at current pace. And I don't know how much more we're going to stretch that. We really want to make each show unique. When somebody sees it's an Unplugged show, we want them to know it's not going to be the show that you saw the last time. It's going to be something totally different.
That's great. Yes. Yeah. That's great that you switched up like that. Do you have folks like yelling out stuff like they think it's so intimate? Like saying, oh, I want to hear this. Or at your shows. Yeah.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we add those greatest hits in at the end, because again, there's a lot of bands who have done Unplugged that are just phenomenal. Like, unfortunately, we're not going to do any Aerosmith on the 18th, but I would love to do Aerosmith. And as we continue to do more and more artists, those songs have a tendency to be added into the back end of the shows because we want everybody to have a good time and hear music that they're really familiar with. And again, there's so many great artists that did Unplugged. It's a shame not to honor all of them. But, after we do the show, there's only about 45 minutes ish at the back end of the night to do the really neat stuff. Like, as I said, we're going to close the show, and I'm not going to tell you how, but we're going to close the show with an artist who never did Unplugged. And it's like one of those things that it's just mind blowing. Like, how have they never done one? With the cello player and with the Unplugged atmosphere, we've got a really, really cool song I'm really excited to close the night with. But it'll be by an artist who never did Unplugged. And hey, maybe we'll cause something into existence. Maybe it'll happen.
Right. You never know. Yeah. I just have so many fond memories. I guess the big, huge one for me is because I was such a big fan of Kiss in the day is the Kiss Unplugged thing, because it was a tough time in their career. They weren't sure what was going on. Music was changing. And when they hit this and it just exploded and everybody's like, they're all here. They're all, it was just an amazing thing. And they finally realized, so what are we doing? Right. We should be bringing this back together.
Right.
And the other huge one we mentioned was Nirvana. That was another huge one. He had already kind of almost reached the pinnacle
Mhm.
there, so it was almost like, a no-brainer to have him there at that point. And I think it
Sure.
was not too far after that he had
Yeah,
passed.
that right. And that wasn't uncommon, unfortunately. Lane Staley died 4 months after they did their Unplugged, and they hadn't played a show in years at that point. So Unplugged was a way to kind of encapsulate a really traumatic time in music, right?
Yeah.
Because it sometimes took a snapshot of that's the last memory some people have of those artists before they found out that they passed away. Like Nirvana, they didn't release their Unplugged album until Kurt passed away. They actually didn't plan to release it, but it was so wildly popular after his death that they just had to release it. And as far as Kiss is concerned, I think a lot of people felt about Kiss, at least in the mainstream, was that they hid behind a really big performance, right? That the music was just kind of okay, that the show was, it was really about the show, going to the show. I think Unplugged, it doesn't allow you to hide behind production.
Not
It
at
really
all.
strips you down. It's a very naked performance. And that's why
Yeah.
musically, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, because there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide
Right.
behind
Yeah.
effects. You can't hide. Everything you do, everything you say, every note that's played is totally naked.
Right.
And that's what makes it such a fun challenge, the few shows that we do a year, and why it's so important to make sure that they're right every time we do them.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's definitely a huge challenge. You have a great point there, because I remember seeing a lot of the different artists, and hearing that music acoustically was a very different experience from a
Mhm.
lot of those bands. Hearing that some of the songs just did normally fit that type of atmosphere, but some of
Mhm.
it was, yeah, it was totally different hearing some of that. And you're right, they had nowhere to hide. You really could see, what skills they had as an artist at that point. And I think that helped a lot of them to grow their fan bases,
Mhm.
also to realize that, and that you're bringing so many different aspects of that into your shows, and you have the different, things on stage and things like that. And I love that you're doing like it episodically.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That's like you're following through. I mean, that's almost kind of like what I try to do with this show. I don't treat this show as a podcast, even though that's what it is. I
Mhm.
treat it more like a show, that we have guests on that are coming up and stuff. But yeah, we all grew up, like you said, that's how we watched it. That's how we digested that episodically with those different things. And I think it made it
Mhm.
more of a bigger statement that was like, oh, who's going to be on this week?
Right.
I remember back in the day when MTV had the live concerts every weekend.
Mhm.
That was
Yeah.
amazing, right? You could see
Yeah.
a concert by whoever. I'd never, I was like, really? You can see a whole live concert?
Mhm.
That was, yeah, they did some amazing stuff. But what you guys are doing, that is very, very cool. I really want to come check you guys out. Again, Town Ballroom, that's coming up, November 18th,
Mhm. Yep.
right here in Buffalo, New York. So folks out there, if you want to come and check them out, is there any openers? Is it just you guys, or?
So we have a sort of super secret opener. So
Okay.
as I mentioned during the band roll call, our drummer is actually a singer and guitar player in a group, the CT Scan, which he's in with our other guitarists. They're a duo. So they're going to open up. They're going to do some of those fringe 90s songs, right, and kind of set the room for everybody. And the neat thing about the Town Ballroom show is there's actually seating available in the pit. So because again, Unplugged was a very intimate setting, we wanted to make sure that we could allow people that wanted to have that. So we do have chairs in the pit that are available
Nice.
for pre-sale, and we'll, only as many as are sold will be available. So day of the show, likely you're not going to be able to get a seat; those are going to have to be pre-sale. But if people need that or want that, you're absolutely welcome to it. We have it as an option, as a ticket option. So CT Scan is going to open for us. And then after that, it'll be general admission, and then we'll do the Jagged Little Pill unplug or Jagged Little Pill acoustic album, then into Nirvana, and then finally into the greatest hits of Unplugged to close the night.
Great, great. So folks want to check more about Unplugged out, where should they go? To your website, or?
Yeah, unpluggedtributeband.com. It's pretty easy. We every social is Unplugged Tribute Band, because there's not one. That's it. We're it. There's, it's a crazy idea. And I really hope everybody comes out to see what it's like, because again, pulling out those old Bud Light commercials or Mountain Dew commercials or MTV news clips, like what's a night of celebrating MTV if you don't have a Kurt Loder MTV news clip,
Right, right.
right?
I was so
Yeah.
amazed when they stopped that news. I think it was like last year, a couple months ago, whenever, and they said, "Oh, we're stopping all the MTV news." I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm like, really? Do you play music on there anymore? Even
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But I remember, watching all that, boom, boom, boom. This is the new,
Yeah.
news from Kurt Loder, and he'd have the music video that's coming out from whoever or whatever different thing. Yeah. Very cool.
It's been so much fun to get into the history of all this, Robert, because like I reached out to one of the primary producer for Unplugged, who did a vast majority of them. His name's Alex Colatti, super cool guy. And he gave me a bunch of the secrets, right? Like he's like, hey, this is what we did here. This is what we did here. This is what we did here. This is how we did it. This is how last minute this was. And he was totally open about talking about it. So I really, really thank him. And he wrote a book that we actually do a TikTok series on, where it talks about each episode individually, has a set list from every episode. And it gives a real brief synopsis of all the episodes up until like mid run through the show. So I don't remember which the last one is, but it goes all the way through the mid 90s into the late 90s. And there's so much information about each individual episode that we did a whole TikTok series on it. And we continue to do that. So stuff like about Rad or Vixen or, like Damn Yankees was on it.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of cool bands that did it, that it's good luck trying to find this stuff, right? You can't find a lot of those performances on YouTube or out in the socials. So we try to remind people.
I was looking
happened.
the last couple days actually to see if we
hard.
maybe would filter some stuff in. There's a little bit, but I didn't think we wanted to use that footage, the little small amount that I have. But the book you're talking about there, is that going to be available at any of your shows or on your site at all? Or
great question. We didn't write it, so unfortunately we don't have stock in the book, but it's totally available on Amazon. That's where I got mine. I actually have mine right here. So it's a super cool book. It's all cardboard. It's like a cardboard front. But this thing is like the Unplugged Bible. It is amazing.
Yeah. Just ask him if he wants to sell it at some of your shows or something. I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of history, Robert. It really is. It's been a ton of information while we move forward with the project, and been a ton of information while we continue to move through the product, because again, like there's so much history about it. It's impossible to cover it all in one night, but we can get to some of it during the live show, give something to somebody that they didn't know about that show. And again, play clips of Beavis and Butthead, and it's totally okay.
Yes. Everybody loved Beavis and Butthead. All right. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for spending some time with us. We look forward to your show at the Town Ballroom Saturday, November 18th in Buffalo, New York. It sounds like it's going to be amazing, man. I can't wait to see it.
Thanks, Robert.
All right. Have a good night.